The first encounter. The desert was quiet that night, except for the distant hum of crickets and the occasional howl of the wind. Dr. Jake Carter stood in the middle of nowhere, staring at the smoking crater in front of him. He adjusted his glasses and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Even at night, the desert heat clung to his skin. The call had come an hour ago. Something had crashed near the research town of Haven Springs, and the military wanted a scientist to take a look. Jake was the closest expert, a young xenobiologist who'd spent years dreaming about life beyond Earth. Tonight, it seemed, his dream had landed in front of him. Jake cautiously stepped closer to the crater. The edges glowed faintly, as if the sand had melted. Whatever had fallen wasn't a meteor. It was too smooth, too metallic. The object shimmered under the moonlight, almost alive. As Jake approached, the air around him felt heavy. It was like stepping into a storm before the first crack of thunder. Suddenly, the object hissed. Jake froze, his heart pounding. A small hatch opened with a soft hum, and a figure emerged. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was breathtaking. The being stood nearly 9 feet tall, her body sleek and otherworldly. Her skin shimmered like molten silver, glowing faintly in the darkness. Her long, flowing hair seemed to defy gravity, floating gently as if underwater. But it was her eyes that held Jake in place. Deep, swirling pools of light, like galaxies trapped in her gaze. She was beautiful in a way that felt almost unreal. The alien woman staggered forward, her movements graceful but unsteady. Jake noticed her feet barely touched the ground, as if gravity was just a suggestion for her. She glanced around, her expression a mix of curiosity and pain. Then her eyes locked onto Jake. "Help," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but echoed in his mind like a song. The word wasn't in English, yet Jake understood it perfectly. Jake hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to run, to call the military backup waiting a few miles away. But something about her made him stay. She didn't look threatening, just lost, scared. The warning. The morning sun cast its golden glow across the endless stretch of desert, painting the sands in warm hues. Jake's truck was parked behind a cluster of jagged rocks, hidden from the world. Inside, Jake sat behind the wheel, his fingers drumming nervously on the dashboard. Lura, the 9-foot alien woman, was seated beside him, her long legs folded awkwardly in the cramped space. She stared out the window, her glowing silver skin shimmering faintly in the sunlight. "Your people hunt me," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a sadness Jake couldn't ignore. Jake glanced at her. "They're not my people. I mean, not the ones chasing you. The military, they don't ask questions. They see something they don't understand, and they shoot first." Lura turned to face him, her galaxy-filled eyes narrowing. "And you? Do you not fear me?" Jake hesitated. He couldn't deny that being near her felt strange. The air around her seemed alive, charged with some kind of invisible energy. Every time she moved, it sent a shiver down his spine, like standing too close to a lightning storm. And yet there was something undeniably human in the way she spoke, the way she looked at him. "I don't know what to think," he admitted, "but I don't believe you're here to hurt us. You wouldn't be hiding if you were." Lura tilted her head, studying him. "You are different. Most of your kind would run, or try to control me. But you stayed." Lura shook her head. "That was nothing. The true danger is my touch, my kiss. It is a weapon, one I cannot control." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Your kiss." Lura nodded. "It is how my people fought. A single touch from me can destroy. I do not wish to harm your kind, but I cannot stop it." Jake stared at her, a mix of fear and fascination in his eyes. "Then why are you here? Why come to Earth if you know you're dangerous?" Lura looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with sadness. "Because my world is gone. And now so am I." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jake didn't know what to say. All he knew was that he couldn't let the military take her, not while she was in pain, not while she was afraid. "Then we'll figure this out," he said firmly. "Together." Lura looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You are different," she said again, almost to herself. Jake didn't respond. He started the truck and drove deeper into the canyon, his mind racing with questions. One thing was certain: his life was no longer his own. The power within. The sky was a deep indigo, scattered with stars that seemed to flicker brighter than usual. Jake Carter stood outside the abandoned barn they'd found for shelter, staring up at the heavens. He wasn't sure if he was admiring the beauty of the universe or dreading what might come from it. Inside the barn, the 9-foot alien woman, Lura, rested in the corner, her glow faint but steady. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his nerves frayed. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself. He was a scientist, not a fugitive. And yet, here he was, hiding an extraterrestrial being while the military scoured the desert for them. His thoughts were interrupted by a low hum, like the sound of distant thunder, but sharper, more alive. Jake turned to see the barn's wooden walls vibrating. He rushed inside, his pulse quickening. "Lura," he called out. She was standing now, her head tilted toward the ceiling. Her silver skin shimmered more brightly, and her hair floated as if caught in a gentle breeze. Her eyes, those swirling galaxies, were fixed on something Jake couldn't see. "Lura, what's happening?" Jake asked, his voice rising. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. "They are coming," she said softly. Jake froze. "The military? Already? How did they find us?" Lura shook her head. "Not them. Something else." Before Jake could ask what she meant, a crackling sound filled the air, followed by a blinding flash of light. Jake shielded his eyes, stumbling backward. When the light faded, the barn door was hanging off its hinges, and 3 figures stood in the opening. They weren't human. Each stood as tall as Lura, their forms sleek and angular. Their skin glowed faintly, though in shades of crimson and gold. Their eyes burned like embers, devoid of the softness Jake had seen in Lura's gaze. They radiated power, and something darker, something dangerous. Lura stepped forward, her glow intensifying. "You should not have followed me," she said, her voice steady but laced with tension. One of the figures spoke, its voice deep and resonant. "You broke the laws of exile, Lura. You know the penalty." Jake's mind reeled. "Exile? What are they talking about?" Lura glanced at him, her expression pained. "I left my world because I had no choice. They wish to enforce the punishment." Jake looked at the newcomers, his fear giving way to anger. "She's not a criminal. She's trying to survive." The figures ignored him. The one in the center raised a hand, and a ripple of energy spread through the air. The barn creaked, the wooden beams groaning under the pressure. "Enough," Lura said, her voice sharp. She raised her own hand, and the energy wave stopped, dissipating into the air like smoke. The tension in the room was palpable. "You cannot stay here, Lura," the second figure said. "This planet cannot withstand what you bring." Lura stepped closer to them, her glow now so bright that Jake had to squint. "I will not leave," she said firmly. "These people, they are not like us. They do not deserve to suffer for our mistakes." Jake's heart raced. He could feel the air growing heavier, charged with energy he couldn't comprehend. "Lura, what's going on?" he asked. She turned to him, her gaze softening for a moment. "I told you, Jake. My kind. We are both life and death. They fear what I might unleash." Before Jake could respond, the lead figure lunged forward, its movements impossibly fast. Lura met it head-on, their hands colliding in a flash of light. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the barn, shattering windows and splintering wood. Jake was thrown to the ground, his ears ringing. When he looked up, he saw Lura holding her own against the 3 figures. Her movements were fluid, almost like a dance, as she deflected their attacks with bursts of shimmering energy. But Jake could see the strain on her face. She was holding back. "Stop," Jake shouted, staggering to his feet. "You're going to destroy everything." The figures ignored him, their focus solely on Lura. One of them fired a beam of crimson light, which she dodged with a graceful leap. The beam struck the barn wall, leaving a smoking hole. Jake grabbed a piece of broken wood, desperation driving him. "Get away from her," he yelled, charging at the nearest figure. It didn't even turn to look at him. With a flick of its hand, Jake was sent flying across the room, slamming into a stack of hay bales. Pain shot through his side, but he forced himself to sit up. Lura's glow brightened again, and for the first time, Jake saw fear in the eyes of her attackers. "Leave this place," she said, her voice echoing with power, "or I will show you why I was created." The lead figure hesitated, its ember-like eyes narrowing. "You would risk it." "For them," Lura said, glancing at Jake. "Yes." The figures exchanged a look, then stepped back. The one in the center spoke again. "This is not over. Your presence here endangers everything." With that, the three figures vanished in a burst of light, leaving behind only silence. Lura collapsed to her knees, her glow fading to a faint shimmer. Jake rushed to her side, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Lura, are you okay?" She nodded weakly. "I am fine, but they will return." Jake helped her up, his mind racing. "Who were they? What do they want from you?" "They are my kind," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And they fear me, because they know what I am capable of." Jake stared at her, realization dawning. "You're not just powerful. You're a weapon." Lura looked at him, her expression a mix of sorrow and determination. "I was created to protect, but in the wrong hands, I could destroy. That is why they will never stop." Jake took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Then we won't let them. Whatever it takes, we'll find a way to stop them, and to keep you safe." Lura's gaze softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, grateful smile. "You are different, Jake Carter. Perhaps that is why I trust you." The chase. The wind howled through the canyons, carrying the sharp scent of dust and fear. Jake gripped the steering wheel of his battered truck, his knuckles white as he swerved around jagged rocks. The roar of engines echoed behind him. Military vehicles were closing in fast. In the passenger seat, Lura sat motionless, her glowing skin flickering faintly like a dying star. Her breathing was slow but deliberate, as if she were saving every ounce of her energy. "They're not going to stop," Jake said, glancing at the rearview mirror. He could see the faint glint of headlights bouncing through the rocky terrain. "They've got helicopters, drones, everything. How do we get out of this?" Lura didn't respond. She stared straight ahead, her galaxy-filled eyes unfocused. Jake had seen her fight. He knew what she was capable of. But she hadn't used her powers since the encounter with her own kind 2 days ago. She was holding back, and he didn't know why. "Lura," he shouted over the roar of the engine, "I need you to snap out of it. If you don't do something, we're not making it out of here." Her gaze shifted to him, and for a moment, he thought he saw guilt in her expression. "If I use my power again," she said softly, "your world may not survive." Jake tightened his grip on the wheel. "Well, if they catch us, you definitely won't survive. So unless you've got a better plan, now's the time to share." The truck jolted as a bullet ricocheted off the rear bumper. Jake cursed under his breath. The military wasn't playing around anymore. "I will not let them harm you," Lura said suddenly. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of finality to it. Jake's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, the truck skidded to a halt as the road ahead disappeared into a steep drop. Jake slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the rocky ground. The truck came to a stop just inches from the edge of the canyon. Behind them, the military vehicles fanned out, blocking any chance of retreat. Soldiers spilled out, their weapons trained on the truck. A helicopter hovered overhead, its spotlight blinding Jake as it illuminated the scene. "This is your last warning." A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands up." Jake looked at Lura, his heart pounding. "We're out of options." Lura's glowing skin brightened, and the air inside the truck grew heavy. Jake felt the pressure in his chest, the same sensation he'd felt when she'd fought off her pursuers before. "I can give you time to escape," she said, her voice steady. "But you must go. Do not look back." Jake shook his head. "No, I'm not leaving you." Lura placed a hand on his arm, and he felt the familiar surge of warmth that always accompanied her touch. "You are brave, Jake Carter," she said softly. "But bravery will not save us both." Before he could argue, she opened the truck door and stepped out. The soldiers shouted commands, but she ignored them. Standing tall, her silver skin now blindingly bright, she raised her hands. Jake watched, frozen, as the soldiers opened fire. The bullets didn't reach her. They stopped midair, hovering like droplets of water caught in a web of light. Lura's glow intensified, and with a wave of her hand, the bullets disintegrated into ash. The soldiers hesitated, their fear palpable. One of them shouted into a radio, calling for reinforcements. Lura took a step forward, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Cracks spread through the earth, and the soldiers stumbled, struggling to maintain their footing. The helicopter above them swayed, its spotlight flickering. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. Lura was magnificent and terrifying, a force of nature that defied comprehension. He knew she wasn't doing this to hurt anyone. She was giving him a chance to escape. But at what cost? "Lura, stop," he shouted, stepping out of the truck. "You don't have to do this." She turned to look at him, her expression filled with sorrow. "They will not stop chasing me. I must end this." Before she could unleash whatever power she was holding back, Jake ran to her, grabbing her arm. The moment his hand touched her skin, a shockwave of energy rippled through the air. Lura gasped, her glow dimming for a moment as she staggered back. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm not leaving you," Jake said firmly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The soldiers took advantage of the distraction, launching a stun grenade. It exploded nearby, and Jake felt his ears ring as the world blurred around him. He fell to his knees, struggling to stay conscious. Through the haze, he saw Lura raise both hands. The energy around her pulsed, growing brighter and brighter. But then she hesitated, her eyes locking onto Jake. "You give me hope," she whispered. With a final burst of energy, she created a barrier of light between them and the soldiers. The earth shook violently, and the canyon walls began to collapse. Dust filled the air as the military retreated, their shouts fading into the distance. When the dust settled, Jake found himself alone with Lura. The barrier had vanished, and she stood before him, her glow faint but steady. She looked exhausted, but she smiled, a small, tired smile that spoke volumes. "You stayed," she said, her voice barely audible. Jake nodded, his throat tight. "Of course I did." Lura placed a hand on his cheek, her touch warm and reassuring. "Then perhaps there is a future for us after all." In the distance, the sound of approaching helicopters reminded them their fight wasn't over. But for now, they had survived. Together, the kiss. The cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. Jake sat at the edge of the worn wooden table, staring at the cup of coffee in his hands. The night was cold, and the shadows of the forest outside danced on the walls. Across the room, Lura sat by the window, her towering frame barely fitting into the chair. Her silver skin reflected the firelight, making her seem even more otherworldly. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Lura was quieter than usual, her gaze fixed on the moonlit forest outside. He knew she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But there was something else, something she wasn't telling him. You haven't said a word since we got here, Jake said, breaking the silence. Are you okay? Lyra turned her head slowly, her swirling galaxy-like eyes meeting his. You risked everything for me, she said, her voice soft. Why? Jake sighed and set his cup down. Because I couldn't let them take you. You're not just some experiment. You're a person. Someone who deserves to live. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. You do not understand what I am. Jake frowned, leaning forward. Then tell me, you keep saying you're dangerous, that you're a threat to my world. But I've seen you. I've seen the kindness in you, Lyra. Whatever you think you are, I don't believe you're a monster. Lyra stood, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the room. She walked to the fireplace, her glowing skin dimming slightly. On my planet, I was created as a weapon, a last resort in a war that destroyed everything I knew. My touch, my presence, it was designed to protect, but it only brings death. Jake stood, his heart pounding. You've saved me more times than I can count. That doesn't sound like death to me. Lyra turned to him, and for the first time, there was fear in her expression. That is because I have been careful, Jake Carter. But my control is fragile. And now, because of what I've done to protect you, I am weaker. Jake stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated, then looked down at her hands. Your species is not like mine. Your bodies are not designed to withstand my energy. Prolonged exposure to me will harm you, whether I intend it or not. Jake felt a cold knot in his stomach. So, what? You're saying just being near you is dangerous? She nodded. Yes. And worse, if I were to. If I were to touch you in a moment of weakness, it could kill you. Jake took a step back, his mind racing. He thought about all the times Lyra had protected him, the times her touch had left him breathless, his heart racing. He had written it off as adrenaline, as something he didn't understand. But now, it all made sense. That's why you've been keeping your distance, he said, realization dawning. You've been trying to protect me. Yes, she said quietly, but I fear it is not enough. Before Jake could respond, a sharp pain shot through his chest. He gasped, clutching at his heart as he stumbled backward. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her hands hovering over him, but not touching. What's happening? Jake choked out, his vision blurring. It has begun, Lyra said, her voice trembling. The energy I have shared with you is incompatible. It is harming you. Jake collapsed into the chair, his breath shallow. Then, what do we do? How do we stop it? Lyra knelt before him, her eyes filled with sorrow. There is only one way. I must take back the energy I have given you. But to do that, I must kiss you. Jake blinked at her, his mind struggling to process her words. What? You just said that could kill me. It could, she admitted. But if I do not, your body will fail. The energy will consume you from within. Jake's heart pounded, every beat feeling heavier than the last. He looked into Lyra's eyes, seeing the pain and regret in them. And if it works, what happens to you? She hesitated. I do not know. It is a risk for us both. Jake closed his eyes, his mind spinning. He didn't want to die, but he trusted her. He trusted that she didn't want to hurt him. And if this was the only way, do it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's gaze softened, and she leaned closer. Her glowing hands cupped his face, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Her lips, warm and otherworldly, pressed gently against his. The moment their lips met, a surge of energy exploded between them. Jake's body convulsed, and he felt like he was being torn apart and put back together at the same time. His vision filled with blinding light, and he heard Lyra cry out in pain. Then everything went dark. Jake woke to the sound of crackling firewood. He opened his eyes slowly, his body aching but alive. Lyra was sitting across from him, her glow faint but steady. She looked weaker than he'd ever seen her, but she smiled when she saw him awake. "You survived," she said softly. Jake sat up, his head spinning. "What about you?" "I am diminished," she admitted, "but you are safe. That is what matters." Jake reached out and took her hand, ignoring the faint, tingling sensation. "No. What matters is that we're both alive, and we're going to figure this out, together." Laura looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. The betrayal. The underground bunker was eerily quiet, its cold steel walls reflecting the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Jake paced back and forth, his boots clanging against the grated floor. His heart was racing, not from exhaustion, but from anger. Across the room, Laura sat on a makeshift cot, her glow dim, her shoulders hunched. She hadn't said a word since they had arrived. Jake stopped pacing and ran a hand through his hair. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Emily said this place was safe, but why haven't we heard back from her?" "It's been hours." Laura raised her eyes to meet his. "Your trust in her is misplaced," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken truths. Jake frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Emily's my friend. She's been helping us from the start." Laura tilted her head, studying him. Even those with kind hearts can be swayed by fear. Before Jake could respond, the sound of a door sliding open echoed through the bunker. Jake turned to see Dr. Emily Vargas stepping inside, her lab coat pristine despite the chaos they'd left behind. Her expression was unreadable, but Jake immediately felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Emily," he said, relief and suspicion mixing in his tone. "Finally, where have you been?" Emily didn't answer right away. She walked toward them, her eyes darting briefly to Laura. "I've been securing our next steps," she said, her voice calm but clipped. "I've arranged transport. The military won't find us." Jake exhaled, some of his tension easing. "That's great. We need to move quickly. They're probably tracking us." But Laura's gaze remained fixed on Emily, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You are lying," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. Emily stiffened, her hands curling into fists. "I'm trying to save both of you," she said sharply. "You don't understand what's at stake here." Jake stepped between them, his confusion growing. "Emily, what's going on? What aren't you telling me?" Emily hesitated, then let out a frustrated sigh. "Jake, do you even realize what you're protecting? Laura isn't just an alien. She's a weapon, one that could wipe out humanity if she loses control. The military isn't the enemy here. She is." Jake stared at her, stunned. "You don't know that. She's been nothing but protective. She's saved my life more times than I can count." Emily took a step closer, her voice dropping. "And what happens when she doesn't save you? What happens when she becomes a threat no one can stop? You've seen what she can do. You've felt it. She's dangerous, Jake. You know that." Laura stood, her towering figure suddenly filling the room with an unspoken power. "I have harmed no one," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But if you betray me, I will defend myself." Emily flinched but held her ground. "This isn't about betrayal," she said, though her hand drifted toward her pocket. "It's about survival. Ours." Jake's stomach sank as he noticed a faint red glow coming from Emily's pocket. His instincts screamed at him. "Emily," he said cautiously, "what are you doing?" Before she could answer, Laura moved. In a blur of silver light, she crossed the room and grabbed Emily's wrist, pulling out a small glowing device, a containment collar. Jake recognized it immediately. He'd seen the military use similar tech to capture dangerous entities. "Laura, wait," Jake shouted, stepping between them. "Emily, what is this?" Emily's face was pale, her eyes darting between Jake and Laura. "It's a safety measure," she said quickly. "For all of us. If she loses control, this will stop her." Laura's grip on Emily's wrist tightened, and Jake could feel the tension in the air growing unbearable. The room seemed to vibrate faintly, the pressure building. "You mean to cage me?" Laura said, her voice laced with quiet fury. "Like an animal." Jake stepped closer, his voice shaking. "Emily, tell me you weren't working with them. Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Emily's expression crumbled. "I didn't want to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "But they gave me no choice, Jake. If I didn't help them, they would have killed us both." Jake's heart sank. "So you sold us out. I'm trying to protect you." Emily snapped. "You don't understand what's at stake. If we don't control her, she'll destroy everything." Before Jake could respond, a deafening alarm blared through the bunker. The lights dimmed, and a robotic voice echoed. "Intruders detected. Security breach imminent." Jake's blood ran cold. "They're here." Laura released Emily's wrist and stepped back, her glow intensifying. The pressure in the room lifted slightly, but her expression was unreadable. "You brought them here," she said to Emily, her tone devoid of malice, but heavy with disappointment. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of boots pounding against the floor above cut her off. Jake grabbed Laura's hand. "We need to move. Now." Laura hesitated, her eyes flickering to Emily. "Leave her," she said simply. Jake froze, torn. "Laura, she's my friend. I can't just." "She is not your friend," Laura interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "She is the reason they have found us." Emily stepped forward, desperation in her eyes. "Jake, don't listen to her. You don't know what she's capable of." Jake turned to Emily, his jaw clenched. "No, Emily, I know exactly what you're capable of." He grabbed Laura's hand and ran, leaving Emily behind. The sound of soldiers shouting grew louder as they fled deeper into the bunker. Jake's mind raced, his heart aching from the betrayal. For now, he could only focus on one thing: keeping Laura safe, whatever the cost. The final choice. The air was electric with tension. Jake stood at the center of the abandoned military testing ground, surrounded by scorched earth and crumbling structures. The stars above seemed dim, their light swallowed by the ominous glow of the enormous energy barrier that crackled around them. Laura stood a few feet away, her silver skin glowing brighter than ever, her tall frame emanating raw power. Her eyes, usually serene and filled with wonder, now swirled with chaos. Opposite her, the military had set up a perimeter. Tanks, drones, and soldiers armed with experimental weapons encircled the site. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their spotlights illuminating the field. At the center of the chaos stood Colonel Reeves, barking orders into a radio. His gaze fixed on Laura, filled with fear and resolve. "This is your final warning," Reeves shouted, his voice amplified by a loudspeaker. "Surrender now, or we'll be forced to eliminate you." Jake turned to Laura, his chest tight with fear. "Laura, don't do this. Please." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the soldiers, her hands glowing with energy that seemed to ripple through the air like heat waves. "They will not stop," she said, her voice low but steady. "Not until one of us is gone." Jake stepped closer, desperation in his voice. "Laura, we can find another way. We always do. You don't have to fight them." "They fear what they do not understand," she replied. "And fear makes them dangerous. If I do not stop them now, they will destroy everything." Jake clenched his fists. "And what about you? If you unleash all your power, you won't survive, will you?" She turned to him then, her gaze softening for a moment. "My survival is irrelevant. Your world must be protected." Jake felt his throat tighten. "No, you don't get to decide that. You're not just some weapon, Laura. You're more than that. To me." For the first time, Laura's resolve faltered. The glow around her dimmed slightly, and the tension in the air eased. She took a step closer to Jake, towering over him, but somehow seeming smaller, more vulnerable. "Jake Carter," she said softly. You have shown me a kindness I never knew existed. But this is not your fight. It is now, Jake said, his voice firm. Because I believe in you. I believe there's another way. A sharp whirring sound interrupted them. Jake turned to see a massive weapon being deployed, a railgun mounted on one of the tanks. Its barrel began to hum, charging with a deadly energy that sent a chill down his spine. Lura, Jake shouted, panic rising. They're going to fire. Lura straightened, her glow intensifying once more. She stepped forward, raising her hands. The ground beneath her feet began to crack, and a wave of energy radiated outward, knocking the soldiers off their feet. The railgun fired, releasing a blinding beam of energy straight at her. Jake's heart stopped as the beam hit her square in the chest. But Lura didn't fall. Instead, she absorbed the energy, her body glowing brighter and brighter, until it was almost unbearable to look at. The soldiers stared in stunned silence, their weapons suddenly feeling useless. Lura turned to Jake, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. It is time, she said. Jake shook his head, stepping toward her. No, there has to be another way. There is no other way, she said gently. I can end this, but I need you to trust me. Jake's mind raced, but deep down, he knew she was right. He reached out and took her hand, ignoring the searing heat that radiated from her skin. If you're going to do this, then you're not doing it alone. Her lips curved into a faint smile. You are different, she whispered. That is why I chose you. With a sudden burst of energy, she pulled him into an embrace. The world around them seemed to dissolve into light. Jake felt the ground vanish beneath his feet, and for a moment, it was just the two of them, floating in a sea of warmth and light. You will survive this, she said, her voice echoing in his mind. Because your world needs hope. Before he could respond, the light around them exploded outward, a blinding wave that consumed everything. Jake felt himself falling, his body weightless, until darkness took over. When Jake woke, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The battlefield was gone. The soldiers, the tanks, the drones, all of it had vanished. He sat up slowly, his head spinning, and looked around. The earth was untouched, as if no battle had ever taken place. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly. But Lura was nowhere to be seen. Jake's chest tightened as the memories came rushing back. He stood, calling out her name, but the only response was the gentle rustling of the wind. Then he noticed something glowing faintly in the grass. He bent down and picked it up, a small silver crystal that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. He held it tightly, tears streaming down his face. You didn't have to do this, he whispered. You didn't have to leave. But deep down, he knew she hadn't truly left. She had become a part of his world, her energy protecting it, her sacrifice ensuring its survival. Jake stood, clutching the crystal. I'll make sure they remember you, he said quietly. I promise. As he walked away, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if she were still watching, still protecting.